defense and have been some of this stuff that we're going to talk about. I'm sure you guys have already heard. I'm sure I've already said it. But there are a few little snippets in here that I've kind of updated with, obviously being in my role at the Wildcats now, and we have a pretty heavy focus on defense. So I'm going to, yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So without any further ado, hope everyone can see that screen. If you can't see that screen, send a message through to Nixie and we'll get that sorted. But if not, look, some of the things that we're going to be talking about today, first and foremost, is why is individual defense important? Then we're going to go through some of the individual teaching points in terms of how do we teach individual defense. Then we're going to talk about some concepts that you can be teaching to your teams that also have a lot to do with individual defense as well. From there, we're going to get into some drills. I've got a video that shows you a bunch of drills and some of the breakdowns as to how we teach it at the Cats. And then lastly, we'll have a couple of resources that we can send through to you as well. So individual defense, why is it important? It's important because, first of all, it's 50% of the game. You know, we as coaches focus so much on the offensive side of things because that's the fun part, that's the exciting part. But really, when we think about it, defense is the other 50%. So it's super important because that's a big part of the game. And secondly, because offensive players are more talented than ever. And I see we've got a bunch of experienced coaches online at the moment, and I would get you to have a think about some of the players that you coach now and compare them to some of the coaches that you, some of the players that you used to coach 5, 10, 15, however many years ago. And I would bet pretty highly that the kids that you're coaching these days can do some things that the other kids never used to be able to do. And that's because the way basketball's taught, what an emphasis is, yeah, kids are getting better and better and better on the offensive side of things than they ever have. And the flip side of that is the offense is getting better. We as coaches need to challenge our players to get better defensively as well. Also, in the way current basketball is, and a lot of it's analytically driven, there's a huge emphasis on getting into the paint and trying to get layups, getting to the free throw line, or shooting three-pointers. You very rarely see the mid-range game, especially as you start to move up into your under 16s, your under 18s, WABL, your state teams, your SBL, that sort of stuff. You don't see a lot of mid-range shooting anymore. And I guess from an offensive standpoint, the thing that kickstarts those free throws, those layups, and those three-pointers is by getting paint touches. And an easy way to get paint touches is if you're going up against a poor defender. So it's very important for us as a defensive team and as defensive coaches that we put an emphasis on keeping the basketball out of the paint. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. We were lucky enough at the Cats, we had Scott Ross coming half through. He was a 30-year NBA coach, and he said that he started getting us to stat paint touches. Because in the NBA, and I know the NBA is a little bit different to what we're doing, but in the NBA, the team that wins the paint touches wins 90% of basketball games. And so we started statting that at an NBL level, and it wasn't quite 90%, it was about 80-odd%. But what we found was our magic number was 35. So if we kept teams under 35 paint touches for the game, we won those games pretty much every single time. So again, I know it's different NBA, NBL, back to your WABL, but if you think about how the majority of baskets are scored in WABL, the majority of them will be scored inside the keyway. Or the majority would be scored from some action that gets a player into the keyway. It might be drive and kick, it might be drive and layup, it might be drive and get a free throw, it might be drive all the way through and then come out the other side and shoot. But generally, at a WABL level, at a junior level, you don't see a lot of baskets scored if the ball doesn't go in the keyway. So that was a huge thing that we put an emphasis on, and it's a big thing for you to put an emphasis on when you're teaching and coaching as well. The other reason individual defense is important for a player's perspective is that's what gets you picked in teams. It doesn't matter whether you're going for a WABL team, whether you're going for a state team, whether you're trying to go to college, whether you want to play SBL, whether you want to, whatever it may be. If you're a good defender, that's going to give you an edge over someone that's not a good defender. And I would ask you to think about the majority of your teams. How many of them have you picked a guy or a girl that's just a lockdown defender? Pretty much every team's got that one kid that can't really score, but they're always talking, they're always down in the stance, they're always getting their hand on the basketball, and those kids are invaluable. And I also think as coaches, we wish we had some more of those kids as well. So a good way to teach your kids to invest in their individual defense is that's what's going to get them picked. You know, if those kids want to go and play a state team, they have to be able to defend. If they want to go and play SBL, they have to be able to defend, not so much within a team concept, but if you're just getting blown by, coaches notice that stuff. And that can get a bit of a red cross next to your name pretty quickly as well. And as coaches, it's pretty important for us to have good individual defenders because it equals winning. And I know that I listened to Nixie's chat the other week about how it's all about development, and I 1000% agree with that. At the junior level, it needs to be about developing these kids to get better and set them up for their next team and their next team and their next team. But we're also competitors, and we also love to win. And a surefire way to ensure that you're going to be winning more games than you lose is by getting a team full of really good defenders. And it's difficult and it's hard, but that's what equals winning. And I'll quickly show you, just bear with me for 2 seconds. I'm going to show you a little stat that we have at the CAT. So this was one thing that this was basically our theme for the whole year. Can everyone see that? If you can't, flick it through to Nixie. We good? Cool. So this is something that we drew up. That's basically Trev's first year in 13-14, and then it's gone all the way through. And the last row in here, obviously we've updated that now, but we actually stuck this up on the wall inside the locker room. And if you go back and you listen to our press conferences from the very get-go, that's what we spoke about. How do we become the best defensive team in the league? Because when we do that, it equates to winning a championship. And the years that we aren't the best defensive team, we obviously don't win a championship. So I just wanted to quickly show you that there. That's kind of the proof that it equates to winning. We always hear the old saying, you know, defense wins championships. That's a little bit of numerical proof right there. The other thing that stands out when I look at this is have a look at the opposition points per game, especially in the years where we've won that. Every single year, it's going up, which goes back to the point before, the offensive players are becoming even more skilled. And even though we've technically had the best defense in the league, we're giving up almost 10 points per game more in the season just gone than in Trev's first season. So that kind of shows you where the trend of the game is going. And I think that's awesome. It's our job as coaches to make sure that we're continuing to coach defense, because if not, that 86 points balloons out to 96 points next year. And if we're not that good defense, then we're probably not going to give ourselves a chance to win. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. All right. Nixie would have sent out the Dropbox links to you guys a little bit earlier. If you have downloaded the videos, we're going to watch the Mitch Norton one now. If not, I'll try and play it through here. Hopefully it's not too buffering and it plays pretty smoothly. But if not, for whatever reason you don't have a copy of it, make sure you hit Nixie up and let you know. So this is a clip from our game round 17 or 18 back at the back end of the year when Sydney and us were jostling for first place. And this is one of my all-time favorite basketball clips. And if there was a way that I could send this out to every single junior coach in the world, I would do that, because what Nordo does is the epitome of what we're trying to achieve from an individual defensive standpoint. So I'm just going to let it roll. If there's any issues, flick it through to Nixie and we'll see if we can fix it. All right, you can see why that's a pretty good clip. Give us a quick thumbs up if anyone got that, if we all got to see that. Excellent, cool. So that's a video that we're going to be relating ourselves back to quite a bit. All right, but that there sums up basically what I'm going to be talking about tonight. So we'll move on to the individual technique. So what's the actual technique of teaching us to play defense? And again, we're pretty lucky that we've got some pretty decent defenders. We've got Damian Martin, obviously, Mitch Norton, obviously, Nick Kay. All of them are fantastic defenders. And so I started watching those guys and figuring out what is it that makes them really good defenders. And one thing that, and then I started going, okay, how can we teach those intangibles that they have to junior kids? Now, one of the first things that pops out is they're incredibly smart basketballers. Now, that's very difficult to teach. And I think the way that you put a basketball IQ by, again, watching film, by getting in reps, by making mistakes, by doing all those sorts of things. You can't sit down and you can't grab little Johnny or Jimmy or whoever and just bang, make them a smart basketballer. That's a long process. What I then decided was, okay, what are some of the physical things that they do that make them an elite defender? And the first one is they're very good at being in a stance. And we all know the old defensive stance, but what's pretty important with that is your feet, making sure they're roughly shoulder width apart, making sure that you bend at the knees and the hips. What we find in junior athletes is rather than bending down, they bend over at the hips. And how many times have you seen one of your kids tell them to get in a stance and they go like this and they bend right down? So it's important that you bend down at your hips and not tilting forward. And the last one is making sure that you have a straight back. And if you can have your feet nice and wide, bend at your hips, and have your back nice and straight, that gives you a really good platform to be playing defense. And it's really tough staying in a stance as well. And I'll go on to the next part as well with your hands, making sure that your hands aren't in your pockets. And how many times have you seen a kid or you tell them to get in a stance and they go and get in a stance and they stand like this with their hands down? And going off on a little tangent here, but if individual offenses are getting better, the reason why is because kids are becoming better shooters and they're shooting more three-pointers. And there's a saying, you have airplane defense, where you're playing defense with your hands straight out like this, like a big airplane. And if you're defending a shooter like that, what are they going to do? Shoot straight over the top of you. So it's important while staying in a stance, you're also got your hands not in your pocket and they're not like airplane hands. So what should we be doing with our hands? There's no right or wrong answer there. Some coaches will say have two hands up. Some coaches will say have one hand up, one hand out for the crossover. Personally, I don't care. I don't care what they're doing with their hands as long as they're up and about above their waist, creating a bit of activity and a bit of energy. And going back to the stance and why that's pretty difficult is because it's pretty tiring. And if you're doubling that by having your hands up above your waist, that's exhausting. And Damian Martin's a freak of nature, but one of the reasons why he's so good at defense is because he can stay in a stance for 24 seconds and he can keep his hands above his waist for 24 seconds. And not just on one possession, he can do it consistently for 40 minutes or however long he's on the court for. So they're probably the two big ones in terms of what your technique is. You've got to be in a stance and you've got to have active hands up above your waist. The third one is more around how do we create contact? And this is super important at all levels of basketball, whether it's NBA, NBL, SBL, WABL, domestic, whatever. As soon as you put your hands on the offensive player, you're generally going to be getting called for a foul, or you're going to give the referees an opportunity to call a foul. So it's really important that we do what we call taking a chest blow. And if we go back to that Norto clip, you'll watch Norto when he slides, he gets hit twice in the chest. Ready? Right there. See how his hands are up above his shoulders? He's sliding his feet with a stance, and he's getting hit straight in the middle of the chest. You have a look at his second effort. And again, Casper's hitting him in the chest. And what that does is that doesn't give the referee an opportunity to bail Casper out because Norto's putting his hands down. Now, can that be still called a foul? Absolutely. But by showing your hands and taking the contact in the middle of the chest, it gives the defense a little bit, swings the advantage a little bit more back to where the defender is. Okay. I also remember a few years ago when Matthew Dellavedova was playing for Cleveland, and they were going up against Golden State in the finals. And for a brief 2 minutes, Delly became the most famous defender in the world because it was coined that he was going to be the Steph Curry stopper. And if you go back and watch those games, Delly was a pest. Not because he was hands all over. He walked straight up to Steph's shoulder and put his chest right in the middle of it. And for 7 games or 6 games or however long it was, Delly's chest was glued to Steph Curry's shoulder. And by doing that, he can walk into him, he can push him, he can maneuver him. But because he's showing his hands, referees weren't calling fouls. And again, I know it's different comparing an NBA player to under 14 wobble. But I guarantee you, if you are teaching your kids to play with their chest rather than their hands, you're going to see the amount of opposition free throws and the amount of fouls called against your team go down dramatically. So we teach that as what we call chest blows. And the last one is you have to want to be a good defender. You have to take it a little bit personally when someone scores on you. If you don't want to be a good defender, a good individual defender, I don't care how athletic you are, I don't care about any of that, you're not going to be. On the flip side, if you really want to be a good defender, your chances are you're going to be. Because staying in the stance, keeping your hands up, sliding your feet, taking chest blows is really difficult to do. And so if you want to do it and you're going to go out and do all those difficult things, that's half of the battle. And as coaches, it's really difficult for us to try and how do we make kids want to be a good defender? If anyone knows, please let me know because I still haven't figured it out as well. What you can do is you can make your practice sessions fun and you can try and put them in situations where they have to try and teach themselves to take that personal challenge and that little personal battle to try and become a good defender. What I've got here is I've got a clip from our last game of the year. We had a young fella playing for us this year, Wani Swaka. Going to be very, very good, but is a rookie and gets himself caught out a little bit in this clip. So I'm going to let it play through and then we'll stop and we'll talk about it. Okay. What I want you to focus on is his stance, his hands, whether he takes a chest blow, and you can't really see his mentality, but I know his mentality and he wants to be a good defender. So just take a look and we'll talk about those 3 things in a sec. Can we all see that all right? Yep, cool. So let's go have a look at it. So Nick Kay takes his shot, misses it. Now, this is a pretty tough situation right here anyway, because Jerome Randall is pretty bloody good. And I wouldn't want to be trying to guard him one-on-one. But that's the way modern basketball is turning into superior offensive players like him, and it's going to be very tough to stop. So let's go through and have a little look at Wani's stance here. For me, that looks pretty good. And I apologize if you can't see it. But for me, that looks pretty good. He's got his feet nice and wide. He's down low. He's bent at his hips. He's got a nice straight back. The thing that we spoke about with Wani afterwards as well is you have a look at his hands. His hands are down, and what happens after that, I'll try and move it slowly. What happens after that is Randall puts the ball on the floor. Wani slides and actually takes a hit in the chest, but because his hands are down on Randall, that gives the referee an opportunity to call the foul and bail him out and get him into an and one. And so that's a perfect example right there of how by playing with your hands down in your pockets, again, Randall's a tough one. He's just going to drive straight at you as soon as he sees that and understand that's a foul. And again, I know that NBL is a little bit different to what you guys are teaching at WABL, but how many times have you guys seen something like that happen at WABL? You see one of your players getting a really good stance and the offense is just trying to bully their way through and they slide their feet with their hands down and referee calls a foul. I reckon every single one of you has seen that at least once every single game. So it happens. Now, if one is playing with his hands out here and he slides his feet, is that still a foul? Possibly. But the fact that his hands are down and his hands are pushing on him, that's an automatic foul. Okay? So we'll just rewind it back again so you can watch Wani. He gets back here. He's down in his stance. His hands come down, and that causes the foul. All right. Next one we're going to talk about is what are some concepts that you can be teaching your team that are going to help your defense. And this is a really big one because there's so many different rules around. There's so many different team concepts. You know, you've got your pack line defenses, you've got your run and jump defenses, you've got your zone defenses, you've got your no middle defenses, you've got your switching defenses, you've got all these different types of defenses, and they're all really good. But the trap that we as coaches can get caught into sometimes is teaching the system rather than teaching our kids how to play defense, rather than teaching our guys how to play defense. So regardless of what your system is, these are still some pretty good points that you can be teaching individually. And if you collectively have 5 players that are all on the court doing these things individually, then you're going to be better defensively regardless of what your concept is. The first one is squaring the ball up. And I know this is probably a bit hit and miss because, again, if you're running a pack line defense, you're trying to force the offense into the middle. If you're a no middle traditional sort of defense, you're trying to pin the ball onto the sidelines. And what we're finding these days is because offensive players are becoming so much more talented, if you open up an angle, they're just going to blow by you. So one thing, and this is one thing that we started to do this year a whole lot more than we have in the past, is actually just squaring the ball up. Because, again, if you look at a guy like Casper Ware, for example, if we are trying to force him to the sideline, he's too good a player. If we push him to the sideline, he's going to go by or he's going to work his magic or whatnot. Same as if we're pushing guys through to the middle, that's a bucket. And I think you will find the more kids become better shooters, the more dribble moves and those sorts of things that that players have, the more likely they are to hurt defenses that are trying to funnel. So squaring the ball up first and foremost is huge. And that's not saying you can't influence to the sideline or influence the ball to the middle, but you don't want to open up your lane and give a driving lane, if that makes sense. The other thing that by saying, all right, we're a no middle team, what that can actually do is that can actually encourage lazy defense. So if I'm guarding someone and your rule as a coach is don't let the ball get in the middle. So I open up my stance right away and get beat down the sideline. I can turn around to coach and say, well, hang on a minute, I didn't get beat middle. That's our whole rule. And so what I find is by trying to push the ball a certain way, it encourages lazy defense and that mentality of that it's okay to get beat. So first and foremost is just square the ball up. Once you've squared the ball up, the second thing is what we call guarding your yard. And generally when you're guarding, you have to guard for 3 slides. And if you're using the old terminology, it's a yard to your right, a yard to your left. And if you can do that, you're going to be a really good defender. Now, there are some offensive players, as we all know as coaches, that are going to dribble the ball for a lot more than 3 times. But think about if one of your players catches the ball. Dribbling, and they make a move, and the defense stops it, they pull it back, they make another move, and they pull it back. What are you as a coach doing? What are you screaming at them? If you can defend for long enough for the coach to say, move the ball, move the ball, move the ball, you're doing really well. So you must be able to defend for 3 slides at least. The second thing is we want to protect the elbows and we want to protect the block. Okay? So if the ball is, say, up here in the middle, I don't know if you guys can see that mouse pointer or not. If the ball is in the middle of the court, we want to protect the elbows. Anytime the ball is penetrated through the middle of the keyway, bad things are going to happen for your defense. It's either going to be a layup, it's going to be a drive and kick, it's going to be a drive and throwback. And so if you, as an offensive player, can get in through the free throw line, chances are really good things are going to happen. So for you as a defender, protect the elbows at all costs. Don't let the ball come in through here. And then the other one is protecting the block. If you're defending out here on the wing, you don't want someone to rip through and beat you in a straight line down here. If you're up here, you don't want someone to beat you through the block down this way. So first and foremost is square the ball up. Secondly, protect the elbows and the blocks. Keep the ball out of those positions, and then that's a really good foundation for your defense. Now, that's a team concept, but it's also individual defense. And that's something that you can coach to your players. Squaring the ball up is simple. Protecting the elbows and protecting the block is something that you as a coach can give feedback on almost instantly. The next part of it is trying to get deflections and be disruptive. How many times are you as a coach, like think about when you play a pressing team. What do they get hundreds of every single game? Deflections. Think about teams that if you're trying to run an offense and they're up and in and they've got active hands and they're swatting the ball away, it's very disruptive and it makes it difficult for you to try and get baskets. So as a defender, put an emphasis on getting deflections and being disruptive. One, it'll probably get you some cheap baskets. But 2, it goes back to that mentality of wanting to be a defender. Going out and squaring the ball up and sliding your feet, that's not fun. Going out and trying to get a deflection every single possession, that's fun. And so by putting your focus on deflections, it means that you have to get in a stance, you have to get your hands up, you have to do all those things that we've already spoken about. Now, are they going to cheat the lanes? Yeah, they probably are a little bit. Are they going to probably give up some baskets? Yeah, they probably are. But that's where you as a coach need to ask yourself, are we happy with those baskets because they're trying to be aggressive, because they're getting on the front foot defensively? And if you are happy with that, then go out and encourage deflections for sure. If not, try and find another way then to try and bring energy. But what I've found is those deflections and being disruptive is the best way to bring that energy. And that's something else that we stat at the Cats. We go through every single game and we stat all of our deflections. We have, I think our KPIs are about 40 that we try and get. That's a very big number. I think we only hit it a few times this year, but that's what our goal is. And we try and stat how many deflections we get as a team, how many deflections you as an individual get, and what your deflections per minute is as well. And so for those of you that are lucky enough to have assistant coaches sitting there on game day, that's something that they can be doing to actively get them involved in what you're trying to do as well. Just a simple chart. How many deflections are we getting a quarter? Who's our leading deflections person? Yada, yada, yada. The last one as a team concept that you can be teaching is to talk. And this is a big one because I can guarantee every single coach on here wants their kids and wants their team to talk more. And it's something that we as coaches need to figure out how to teach that. I see a lot of coaches sometimes will go to the, hey, we've just got to talk, when they're not quite sure what an adjustment needs to be made. And a lot of kids will, okay, and you yell at them, say, hey, we need to talk more, we need to do this, we need to do that. But if you as a coach haven't actually told them what to say, it makes it very difficult for them to actually go and say it. So a simple phrase that that we use is talking your task. To make it very, very simple, when you're playing defense, you talk your task. Whatever you're doing at the moment, let everyone know that you're doing it. So if I'm guarding the ball, 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 ball. If I'm in the help, 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 help. If I'm sprinting back in defense, I'm getting back, sprint, sprint, sprint. If you're standing in the corner, I'm standing in the corner. But what that does is that one brings a little bit of energy, because if you've got all 5 guys standing there going, yeah, I'm just standing here, at least they're talking and they're doing a little bit more. It also puts a bit more emphasis on what you're trying to do. So if I've got the ball, now I'm locked into defending the basketball. Or if I'm one pass away on the right, one pass away, that then puts my mindset into a help mindset. And what it can also do is it can also remind your teammates to do something as well. So again, we're not talking about transition, but if I'm sprinting back and I'm yelling sprint, 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 the guy next to me who's jogging will go, oh, I need to sprint back as well, hopefully. And so what that can do is that can be a bit of leadership for your team as well. So talking your task, whatever you're doing, just talk that. And what you'll find is you also then can have an impact without actually guarding the ball. So taking it back to being a good individual defender, if I'm guarding a guy in the corner who's not moving, it's pretty tough for me to be an effective individual defender because they're not touching the ball, they're standing in the corner, they're doing whatever. If I'm communicating and letting my teammates know what's going on, that can be a way for me to be effective while I'm not technically involved in the play. So that's a really good one there as well. We'll go back to this clip of Norton and we'll look at squaring the ball up. So here, oh, my bad. So Norton sprints back and now he's squared the ball up. We spoke about guys being really good offensively. If Norton changes his angle like this and pushes him this way, that's a layup. If Norton jumps up on this side here and pushes him through to the middle, it's probably going to be a layup, or he can step in instead of pick, or bad things are going to happen for us. So the number one thing that Norton needs to do is get his feet in line with the 3-point line. That's a good way to just say, hey, if you don't know where to square, get your feet lined up with the 3-point line, or get your body in between the ball and the basket, which is what he's done there. So that's the first one, squaring the ball up. And the second thing is guarding your yard. For 3 dribbles, a step left or a step right. Okay, we have a look here at Casper, puts it on the floor, 1, 2, 3, 4 dribbles. And then have a look at what Casper does. And so this is a scenario where Norton can be using his voice to still be an effective individual defender. Casper had given up by that point, but you see here Norton's turning around and he's now calling out pick and roll coverages from the other side of the court. Shot goes up, he goes to box out, and then we end up securing a stop. So again, we don't want to overcomplicate a lot of our rules. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. But if you, regardless of what your concepts or your overall structure is going to be, if you can square the ball up and you've got 5 players that can all square the ball up, if you've got 5 players that can all guard their yard, if you've got 5 players that are all chasing deflections, you've got 5 players that just talk their task, I don't care what else you do. You're going to be a good defensive team. And we spoke about earlier, if you're a good defensive team, that equates to winning, which I know you guys, I know we're all about development, but we also love to win. By doing those 4 things, that's your development for your players. And the byproduct of that is you're going to have lots and lots of fun in your games as well. All right. Next one, how do we teach it? So again, we've spoken about defense. It's pretty boring. And a lot of guys aren't really getting excited to go out and practice defense and do defense drills and those sorts of things. So it's our job as coaches to try and find a way to make it fun. And the best way, one, to make it fun, but also the best and most efficient way of doing it is just by playing one-on-one. And you look at how kids you look at how they're doing their basketball these days. They're doing so much structured basketball, whether it's school, domestic, WABL, clinics, whether it's with individual coaches, whether it's whatever. They're doing so much basketball that they also don't have the chance just to go and mess around with their mates. And that's where I find that a lot of players actually learn and actually get better. I remember back when I was a kid, school holidays would come through and Van would open up the stadium for us and we'd go in there and we'd just play 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3. And there'd be no coaches, no referees, no one yelling at us. If you won, you stayed on the court. If you lost, you got off the court. And by playing in those situations, you learnt so much more. And you learnt how, I remember trying to defend the guy, Matt Schmedic, who was very, very good at offense. And he used to kick my butt all the time. And I got sick and tired of losing, 11-2, 11-4, whatever it was, that I had to teach myself how to try and stop him. And so by being put in that situation, that helps me as a player. And I feel that because there's so much structured basketball going on, kids don't get that opportunity anymore. So as coaches, we can build that into our training sessions. And as I said, the best way is playing 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, and we'll show you a bunch of drills in a minute that are going to help with that. And the other thing is encourage creativity with your offense. Sometimes when I was coaching junior teams, I would tell our kids, hey, think about who your favorite NBA, WNBA, NBL, think about who your favorite player is, and I want you to try and be like them for the next 5 minutes that we're playing 1-on-1. And you'd see some crazy stuff offensively and some wild shots going up, but you'd also see some really good offense. And we want that really good offense because then it's up to the defense to have to teach it or to have to try and stop it, sorry. I don't want to talk about Damo too much, but Damo sometimes throughout the year will grab Bryce and they'll go and play 1-on-1 after practice. But Damo won't touch the basketball. He'll sit there and he'll play for 10, 15 minutes just trying to guard Bryce. And if Damo got a stop, he got a point. And if Bryce scored, he got a point. And they played to 11. And I don't know about you guys, but I can't think of anything worse than trying to run around and stop Bryce Cotton without touching a basketball myself. But that's what he has to do in order to refine his craft. In order for him to be a good defender, he needs to defend the best players. And so it's not every day, but there are some days where he'll just grab Bryce and be like, hey, let's get a quick hit of 1-on-1. And they'll go and do that. The second way to teach it is not by doing defensive drills. I know some of the drills that we're going to see are defensive drills, but especially with junior athletes, if you go and say, right, we're going to do a defensive drill now, they're going to get bored and they're going to switch off straight away, or they're going to come up with a negative connotation to what the drill is going to be. Now, it might be a really fun drill, but as soon as you say we're going to work on defense, that flicks a switch in their head and they start thinking negatively about it. So don't have defensive drills, have basketball drills. And I know that as coaches, we all want more time. We're lucky that we get our guys for 2 hours every single day. You guys are lucky to get them 2 sessions a week at WABL. I know there are some clubs out there that only get them 1 time a week. But as coaches, we all want more time. So you can't just do a defensive drill. You have to do an offense, like a dribbling drill and a shooting drill, and add in some defense in there as well. And by doing that, that makes it a little bit more fun for your kids. The big one that I want to take away from this slide, though, is don't overcomplicate it. Defense is something that, again, we all get into the trap of as coaches of what the perfect defense looks like. And when someone drives from the baseline, this guy here helps, and then this guy drops through, and the ball gets passed back out, and then you rotate this way and rotate this way, and you da-da-da-da-da. And again, the trap that we all get into, but what you find is the more rules you have, the more likely you are that those rules are going to be broken. And I think it was Nixie that spoke last week about you guys have to set your coaches up for, set your players up for success. And by giving them a whole bunch of rules isn't really setting them up, because chances are someone's going to break down, and it might be tiny, but they're going to break down on one of those rules. And then they technically haven't done what they're meant to do. So don't overcomplicate it. And again, if I was coaching WABL, if I was coaching juniors, it would be square the ball up, guard your yard, try and get deflections and be disruptive, and talk your task. And that would be my rules, especially at the junior athletes, because that's very, very simple things to do. And it's also very simple for you to coach it as well. And the last thing with individual defense is don't ignore it. How many times have we coached a kid that's a flat out shooter, or they've got all the dribble moves in the world, but they don't play a lick of defense? Now that kid's pretty good because they put points on the board. But how many times have you coached that kid, seen him get beat, seen him not try on defense, seen him do whatever, and you just ignore it? Because by the time you get the chance to coach them, they've gone down and scored another 2 buckets. Happens quite a bit, okay? It's very important as coaches not to ignore it, because as that kid grows up and everyone else kind of catches up offensively, his or her ability to play defense and stop your opposition is going to be the ticket to making a team at the next level. So it's very important. Don't ignore it. I've got a couple of drills here. Hopefully you guys can all see it. I'm just going to kind of talk it through. This is just a cross section of some of the different drills that we do at the Cats. If you have any questions or want to stop and talk about these, send your questions through to Nixie. But I'll let it play and hopefully try and not stop and start too much. So our first one, we've all seen this, is just mass defensive slides. Honestly, I don't really like this drill, but it's good for a quick 5-minute hit with these guys, just to talk about that stance, hands up, active hands, how do we slide, how do we take a chest blow, all those sorts of things. Wouldn't be doing this too much with junior basketball. One, because it's a very one-dimensional drill, but secondly, they're going to get very bored very, very quickly. And I think you can find a way to teach slides, like this drill, for example, just doing zigzags back and forth without a ball. This is probably a lot more, I guess, relevant, because it teaches, it's a little bit more dynamic. It teaches staying away from an arm's distance, and it's a bit more fluid with decision making. Then you introduce the basketball, and it's the same drill, basically. Zigzags down with the basketball, trying to stay an arm's distance away, squaring the ball up, and trying to take it on the chest if we need to. The next drill is just what we call ball pressure. It's literally that. We throw the ball out, have a closeout, active hands, tracing the ball, and then it might be 2 slides to the left, 1 slide to the right, 2 retreats, and it's just back and forth. And we'll do these drills probably a couple of times a week. Next one, we go out into deflections, essentially piggy in the middle. And this is grown men that have done this a whole lot. They love this drill. We'll go for 24 seconds. Who can get the most deflections in 24 seconds? Really good one as well, to focus on your pivoting, to focus on your passing, to focus on your pass fakes and those sorts of things offensively. We never want to just have defensive drills. This is a really good one as a basketball drill. Next one is just denying the wings. So we practice denying out into the wing, couple of slides. So we deny the wings, couple of slides, get back to our help position, And we might do this for a minute, a couple times a week. We'll go out into 3-man closeouts, 4-man closeouts, and depending on where we're at, will depend on what we're doing. And just before we get into one-on-one, just with your closeouts, I don't know what happened there, sorry, my bad. Just with your closeouts, it's important to teach what to do after the closeout as well. This is something that I'm guilty of as well. When I used to, again, before I went to the Cats, I would do a closeout drill, and it would be, sorry, I don't know what happened there. It would be closeout, and then stop, drills over. And so what you see with here is it's closeout, couple of slides, get back to a held position, then drills over. And it's a little thing, but it also just puts that little emphasis on finishing off the drill. Close out, slide, back into a held position, done. Next one I'll go into some one-on-one sequences. So the first one is one-on-one 3-quart, front the post, deny the ball at the top, and then play one-on-one. Not a good job, but there by Wani. Again, defending the backcourt, front the post. Now it's a skip pass, close out, and play. Kyle does a pretty good job there, contesting a shot and finishing it off. Sorry, let me just turn that down. Next one, just straight one-on-one from the wings. And this, I haven't spoken about it, but something that's really important as well is sometimes just the offense is just better. You know, Mitch does a fantastic job here. He pushes Bryce out. He takes a chest blow. He slides. He's got his hands out, and Bryce still makes a bucket. Sometimes better offense beats really good defense. So here, takes it in the chest. Bryce steps back and hits the shot. That's going to happen. One-on-one from a touch, and one-on-one drills, there's thousands of them on the internet. You just need to jump on there, find out what the best one-on-one drills are, and go through. And the best thing is just experiment as well. You know, there's nothing, like, even if the drill doesn't work the same way that you would like it to as a coach, doesn't mean it's wrong. As long as the kids are getting reps of playing one-on-one, both offensively and defensively, then you're pretty good. And this one here just starts as a touch, so a bit of a closeout. And then we go through and play. Body up drill for our bigs. So Jesse's on defense, kick out, wall up. Working on our chest blows, working on our reactions, staying low, good stance, hands above his shoulders. And finally, mismatch. So this is a 5-man playing against a 1 out on the perimeter. And then we'll get it. So Damo goes in the post against Gus. And now they're playing one-on-one. This is a good one, I guess, for some of the older age groups with the way that defenses tend to switch a whole lot more. That's a really good one to simulate with your bigs defending out on the perimeter, and then your guards having a battle in the post as well. So just a little cross-section of some of the drills. Again, we've got hundreds and hundreds of them. I feel it's not necessarily about the drills. I think Andrew spoke the other day. It's not so much about the drills. It's about you teaching and what you're trying to teach. And you can see there that some of those drills are pretty simple. I guarantee most of you have already done versions of those drills anyway. But it's what you teach. It's about squaring the basketball up. It's about having active hands. It's about being in a stance, getting deflections, all those things that we've spoken about. All right. Being cognizant of time. Last thing that I just wanted to have and start having a think now about any questions that you've got. I'm flicking through to Nixie. Last thing I just want to say is, what are some resources that are going to help you? And you guys are very, very lucky with Nixie and the guys there at the Wolves. They're a great resource. I know that they're more than willing to help if you have issues, and I'm sure this is already happening. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask those guys for help. Basketball WA also have a really good Facebook coaches page. Again, I'm sure most of you guys are a part of that. And their YouTube page has got a bunch of clinics and drills and those sorts of things on there. Basketball Australia also have the same. FIBA have their coach's manual, I guess, and that goes into great detail as to how you break down those certain skills, no matter what it is, not just defense. They're enormous big booklets, so that there's really good. And I guess the best resource is other coaches. One thing other coaches love to do is talk about themselves and talk about their teams. So you see, not just within your club, if you're playing against Sterling, for example, and they're, they play a really good half-court defense, don't be afraid after the game to go and shake the coach's hand and say, hey, how do you get your defense so good? One thing, it's going to make them feel pretty good about themselves. But secondly, I guarantee you they're going to say, yep, let's go get a coffee and I'm going to tell you how good we are. And although it's a little bit of ego stroking, they could also tell you some pretty good things in terms of drills or teaching points or whatever it may be. So other coaches are a really good resource to be able to use as well. I've also given Nixie, he's going to send it out afterwards, the slides from here. And he's also got a little PDF with some links to some of these pages and stuff that we've got there. But without any questions?
So the only sort of question that that I had come through was about off-ball defense compared to defending the person with the ball.
Yep.
Firstly, first part, is it, in your opinion, is it easier to defend a person with the ball in their hands or the person trying to play off the ball? And which do you think is easier to teach?
Well, it's definitely easier to defend off the ball because they don't have the basketball. You can't score when you're off the ball. So it's probably easier to teach and defend that. In terms of what was the second part? Was it how do you teach it, or?
Which is easier to teach? Teaching on-ball defense, or so defending the person with the ball, or defending off the ball?
So it probably comes down to a little bit of both. Like both of them have their easy points, both of them have their hard points. The easy one, teaching defending the ball, is you can very easily give a result. So if I'm defending the basketball and they score, I probably didn't do a great job. Or if I'm defending, sorry, let me rephrase that. If I'm defending the ball and I get blown by it and someone gets an uncontested shot, then I did a bad job. If I'm defending the basketball and I protect the elbows, protect the block, and force a contested shot, I've done a good job. So it's easier to give feedback on defending the actual ball, but the skill of that is a lot harder because offensive players are becoming a whole lot better. Off the ball is difficult, but it also is difficult to teach off the ball depending on what your preferences are, because there's a lot more moving pieces off the ball. It's different being one pass away than it is two passes away, than it is a skip pass. It's different defending a shooter as to a non-shooter and those sorts of things. So I would definitely say that teaching the on-ball is more important and probably a little bit more difficult, but it's easier to give feedback and it's easier to be result-driven than it is off the ball. I'm sure that's a pretty roundabout way of answering that question, but hopefully that answers it.
No, that's good. And probably the only other thing was those 4 points to keep it nice and simple. Can you just repeat them for us? So it's the square up and whatnot.
Yep. So square the ball up, guard your yard. Where was it? Square the ball up, guard your yard, get deflections, and talk your task.
Cool.
Yep.
No problem. Tomo, did you have anything else?
No, I'm pretty good. I just want to say thanks to Trigger for that sort of stuff. I think it's a great way to break it all down into 4 simple points and stuff like that to make it easier from a coaching point of view for you guys to pass down to your players, particularly the younger age groups. But I guess the importance, and I reckon the really one you need to take from is people wanting to play defense. Defense isn't something to do while you haven't got the ball in your hands on offense. And I think if we make sure that's an absolute focus of ours at an individual level, it will definitely help our kids as they get through the levels and actually take on more team concepts and more complex ways of sort of playing team defense as well. So if we do our job well at an individual level at younger age groups, they'll be much more inclined to be able to understand the concepts of teams at the next levels above for guys like Andrew, Nixie, and hopefully someone like Luke as well at that level.
Awesome. So thanks for taking the time, Trigger. Really appreciate you coming back and giving us your perspective on individual defence. It's definitely a direction that we want to go in, making sure that we're the best defensive club in the league. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you doing this for us.
My pleasure. Just want to show quickly one more thing as well. Just with this clip here, we'll go back to the Nordo clip. I know we spoke about Nordo, but I also want to bring into focus Jesse and Tariko. Jesse is here. Can you guys see the screen still?
Yep.
Yep, cool. So Jesse's here and Tariko's here. And Jesse has been around for a long, long time. Tariko, import, has made lots and lots of money. Both of them have every right to say, you know what, I'm not going to sprint back when Bryce shoots this ball. But I want you to look at both of their effort, and going off on a tangent, but D-Trans, one of the main things that you guys need to be teaching is just sprinting back as quickly as possible, especially in a live situation like this. And so just watching this clip, I wanted to bring to attention both Jesse and Tariko's effort to get back in front of the ball. Head down, getting back, and that allows Nordo to go and do his stuff as well. So I know it's a little bit of a tangent, but individually, transition, sprint back as much as you can. And I just wanted to point that out with that clip.
Excellent.